Middle right side's ready. Middle left's ready. All the way left. Wearing a microphone, but just for the Zoom attendees, I guess. So AV guy might come and magnify me, but you can hear me? Good. And how about in the back? Can you hear me? I'm going natural. Audible? Here. Finally, the last person we were waiting for. He's here. So nice. So really wonderful to be here. Thanks for all joining me, and it's just a pleasure to be out in person, be at this awesome event. Really excited that the organizers were able to make it happen and that so many great people were able to join. So super excited to be here as Arctop and to see what comes out of this, all the projects and all the other companies here. Really amazing. So yeah, thanks for choosing to spend your time with me here. This workshop this afternoon. After this, I'm available, Ryu's available from our team, that's there on Discord. I'll share some links. But just to start, before we dive into it, introduction is we're Arctop, a neural interface company. Going to be talking to you about Neuos today in our Neuos SDK. But just, to start, quick gauge of the room. Who's heard of neural interfaces before, or brain-computer interfaces? Nice. We must be at MIT or something like that. Cool. And how many of you have worked with neural interfaces or brain-computer interfaces? Nice. Awesome. So this is perfect audience, much more informed than a lot of audiences where neural interfaces, BCIs, are still like emergent, very edge of the technology. But this is a technology that's coming in fast, and there's a lot of deep research that's been done, a lot of development that's being done commercially. And so all the ones that have worked with it before, happy to talk more after and differentiate, help you, in the bits and bytes. All those that have heard about it and just curious, that's really why we're here today, is to get you the opportunity to work with it as developers and to basically fuse, theme of fusion, fusing with all the other devices, be it AR, VR, haptic vest, mask, anything that you want to connect to. Our whole essence is getting your brain into the computer in real time. So with that, thanks for the feedback. Gives me a good sense for who I'm talking to, and I'll skip a couple sentences in the overview. The overall, what we're doing today, I'm presenting Neuos SDK. So Neuos is our software, our secret technology that's special in that it can digest a lot of brain data and output in a simple, clean way that's fast for developers to build with. So one of the big gaps that we saw in our field is, a lot of available sensor technology. Hello, welcome. And then it's very hard to actually build meaningful applications. So we're just 2022, March. In the next year or two, we're going to see just a ton coming into the market. Just today, Snap absorbed a company, NextMind, out of Paris. I don't know if people saw that news, but public, so integrating for their Snap spectacles for control. Meta's doing a lot of work on this. It's a very fast moving space. So here today, I want to talk to you just about Neuos, but then offline and out, we can talk in any direction about BCI. Neuos is a real-time neural interface, an API. So, and it's enabling direct brain to computer communication. So because this audience is who you are, I won't elaborate more. It's a BCI technology. And who are we? So a little context here. We're Arctop. We were founded in 2016 in San Francisco by myself and my co-founder, Eitan K. My name is Dan Furman. I'm a PhD with school in a liberal arts college down the river. Did neurobiology at Harvard. What can you do? Happy to be here though. So did undergraduate, and then I had an amazing opportunity to work with Stephen Hawking after I graduated. So Stephen Hawking's communication system was doing eye tracking, and he was clicking with his cheek at that time. And then he lost the ability to move with that cheek. So all of a sudden, his Intel-made system, beautiful recommender system, just really amazing power there, but it was dysfunctional kind of overnight because you couldn't click and it wasn't working to dwell. So what we did is we were working to adapt our non-invasive technology at the time to replace that cheek click. So this gives a lens into the huge accessibility, application of BCI, and really the core of where this research has come. Why BCIs are now available to all of us is because it came from really a lot of deep medical need here. And so Hawking also never wanted to implant himself. So despite his condition, that was the last thing that he wanted. So companies like Elon Musk's Neuralink and BrainGate, a lot of really compelling technology that you can put into the brain is going to work for some, but again, there might be future Hawkings out there who, despite the benefits, they really don't want to tamper with, say, their engine, the core machine, don't want to insert anything. So that's our line, is we want you to be able to put things on, take it off. As new sensors come, as new headsets, you can swap it out. We want it to be very non-invasive, very friendly, very comfortable. So that was after undergraduate talking, and then started building more and more, did my PhD in neuroscience, and started forming Arctop. So Arctop's team now is made up, we have leaders from Apple, Google team, as well as Stanford, Technion, and Harvard. And Neuos is our unique neural interface technology that's coming out of our research, and it's ready today. So it's been validated. We're not publishing so much as a company, just as an early stage company, but we have published Frontiers in Computational Neuroscience, which you can read that review. We've had some coverage by Amazon Science blog, and you can look into that. We've been granted many patents. And then most importantly, I think for us, especially here, is that it's in use. It's commercially available. Companies are working with it. It's entering the world. And so one of our reasons for coming here today is to present it to you and give some of the first opportunity to access Neuos in our closed beta. And so I'll talk about what we're doing with that today, but super excited to be here. Again, we built the company up over the last 6 years. The core of that has all been deep R&D. And now as we start to release the SDK, we're really excited about the different features that we'll be unlocking over time. So if you start with us today, start in the hackathon, you'll get a certain set of features, certain things you can do. And then as we go further, you'll get more and more capabilities over time, and it's going to be the same Neuos. So part of our vision is this to be interoperable. So as you have different VR headsets, it can work with that, different AR. Neuos, as a developer, you're just dealing with Neuos. And then as a user, you can trust in Neuos. Neuos knows you, and it has a certain performance. So that's our kind of quick background. The technical problem we're solving is probably painstakingly familiar to many that have worked in BCI, maybe some that have read about it, but the signal that we have is very, very noisy signal, to say in a simple way. Yeah, good. It's a superimposition problem, right? So you can think about, we have the brain and there's volume conduction in the brain. So every time a neuron is active or groups are active, it's sending some currents through the brain, and then this conducts. The volume conducts, it superimposes. So as I'm talking right now, I'm also looking, seeing things, I'm hearing things. There's a lot of streams at once. And then there's a big envelope filter, basically my skull. One of the reasons why people like to implant things is you get rid of that filter. But bottom line, the skin is very active with brain signal all the time. And the skull is filtered what the brain is doing. The brain is conducting all on top of itself, and then ultimately hits the skin and it scatters. There's tons of correlations across the scalp. So a lot of people talk about different locations and you'll see hair nets, but bottom line, anywhere where you touch skin, that signal is going to be super correlated with the signal somewhere else. Maybe amplitudes will be different, but there's a whole really fascinating science. Is the work of neuroscience, computational neuroscience, is making sense of this signal. So just visually, to give you a kind of intuition for this, we have 4 sensors. So this is real data that we just pulled out to give you a quick peek. So the 4 sensors are 2 on the forehead, 2 behind the ears in the mastoid position. So does align very well with, say, what glasses form factors we'll have in the future, right? So nothing over hair here. These are all skin sensors. And then on the left, this is voltage data over time. So this is voltage data from all the sensors. And that snapshot is someone in a state of low enjoyment. So they're not enjoying what they're doing. They're not enjoying, it was a listening task. On the right is high enjoyment. So they're really enjoying it. If I were to ask you to rank on a scale 1 to 10, the one on the left is like a 2 to 3, really not liking it. Other one's like an 8 or 9. So huge difference in the human experience. The data is really indistinguishable by eye, right? And that's because, again, volume conduction of the emotion that's in the brain is also combining with lots of other things, hits the scalp, hits the skin. There's eye blinks. Eye blinks are very loud electromagnetically. The tongue is even a dipole. There's a whole laundry list of reasons why the signal is very messy. And one of the reasons we're here, or Neuos is here, is to deal with this problem for you, right? So to get the analysis up to a level where as developers, you can go after the dream of this neural interfacing, being able to directly communicate with computer without needing to go down to the bits and bytes and write all the algorithms yourself, which has kind of been the state of the field up to now. So what we try to get it to is Neuos, where you then get a single output for each different vector. So you'll have an array of, say, enjoyment, and that array will give you a value that correlates to the person's level of enjoyment. So 0 to 100, less than 50 is not liking, not enjoying it, many measurements per second. Above 50 to 100 is very much enjoying it. So it really simplifies this. We split up this stream, you know, all the superimposed data, split it up, and we start releasing these streams of really usable data from the neural interface side. So this leads to what we call really continuum of applications, human-centric applications. So this is everywhere from treatment, and again, this is just a snapshot, kind of some of the key fields that are standing out in treatment. So you have the paralysis use cases in insomnia, you know, helping people fall asleep. Brain measures are a gold standard there. Epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, autism. There's a lot where neural interface can be used to actually connect to applications or healthcare providers, medical use cases where it's actually helping to treat, you know, symptoms. All the way up to enhancement goals, which is that there's not a necessary condition, but it's, say, an athlete that wants to get peak performance, or a esports team also using it. And I can talk specific examples here, but esports team that's trying to get ready for performance, and every 10 milliseconds of reaction time is super meaningful there. And so the ability to get this very rich live stream of data is critical. Also just casual gaming, entertainment, learning applications. So people that are, you know, don't necessarily have learning disorder, but you want to learn a language faster than you would if it's not sensitive to your brain. So we have this big spectrum where kind of say everything in between, right? So there's the deep enhancement capabilities that are almost kind of superhuman or beyond human capabilities, the pure brain assets to treatment, which is really revolutionizing healthcare, medicine, what you can do there. And then in between, there's more apps than we can even imagine. So that's kind of our outlook as a company, is that we want to get you the best data second by second so that you can build these different applications wherever you see fit. And so we see a really big ecosystem coming on top of the neural data that we're providing. So where are we today? So the Neuos SDK today, again, there's a rich pipeline of more releases, and in BCI, I don't want to take this as a limiting factor. This is our release for you at the hackathon. Widely today, what we're working on are these very significant outputs that we think can be used very powerfully in different areas. So what Neuos SDK does today is you're putting on a headband, and it's measuring focus, it's measuring enjoyment, it's measuring the zone. So this is a state of flow, right? Where you're immersed in an activity, you're kind of losing track of time. It's very high focus, very high enjoyment state, but this state of zone is very useful across different modalities. And then also heart rate and head motion. So the heart rate's coming right off the head. Again, any wearable device can get you heart rate today. That's not necessarily anything special. And head motion, we give you a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. So it tells you if someone's stationary or if they're very active, but it's not going to give you the high resolution head tracking that another device would wear. So one of the things that we're suggesting, encouraging, is interfacing with other devices if you want to do, say, head movement tracking. But everything, when it comes down to brain, we're the only neural interface company here today. We can see it working with most of the applications that we've talked to, the potential teams so far. And so as teams form and ideas form, we'll be really happy to talk to you about implementations for these signals. I'm going to show some videos and some examples now of how to use it, but very short, very simple requirements. We'll provide the SDK key to anyone that would like it. We have headbands here that we're loaning out the headbands, as many as your team needs. And then you'll download our app, and that takes you from there. And so two key things about the software is, one thing in this space, brain signals are very different for every person. So there's some commonalities for sure, but just like we all know, in different ways, there's a lot of diversity in people, and it goes down to the individual. So even identical twins, their brain signals are very different. So what Neuos does is it calibrates for each person. This is a unique part of the technology that makes it much more accurate than some other technologies that are available that kind of might be generally right, but not accurate for the individual time and time again. So We calibrate through our own process. It's about a 10-minute experience where you're playing some games, you're doing some math problems, you're doing some verbal creativity problems, and basically you're interacting with your mobile phone while wearing the headband, and then it calibrates. So then that calibration cycle is where we can apply all our heavy machinery, so to say, our deep learned networks, all the algorithms that we have that have been trained on huge data sets, people in different contexts, tune it up for you, and then deliver to your device a very light algorithm that'll run on edge. So once you calibrate is just for you, it's one time, and then you're able to connect to Neuos. Neuos gives real-time outputs to the application. So that's kind of the user-centric perspective. From the developer side, there's a lot more details just in the GitHub and our Discord. So that'll be, again, we're around, so you can come up in person, but also these are the useful links. And now, so as a developer, best place to go is Discord. Our hashtag developers start here, ! This is Arctop's Discord. We're going to be answering questions, both me and Rue, but then also all the team that is not here physically will be there to respond. So anytime, day or night, use Discord. That also walks you through all the process of just basically signing up. You register and we'll give you the ability to download our app. So that app serves as your little hub where you can calibrate, and then you're able to use it with your own app. So we're in Android today. I'd say we're integrated with a lot of other languages. There's more releases coming, but for this hackathon, just an Android release. Of course, iOS, Unity, Unreal, all these are coming. You can easily bridge that. So all the data that we're providing, the focus, the enjoyment, the zone, once you integrate Neuos into your app, Android, you can send that data anywhere you want. You can record it. You can do what you wish with it. So to get into these other applications, we can help and assist. So just talk to us if you want some assistance there. But the core is an Android SDK. Got our GitHub up. Compatible headbands are here. So we're using an off-the-shelf fabric headband today. Neuos works with a lot of different hardware. We've streamlined kind of what our release is now, and into the future, you can expect to see some more headwear from us, from partners that we're working with behind the scenes. So more on that later, and I can talk to people separately if you're interested in that. But bottom line, we have a very nice off-the-shelf fabric headband that's safe, cleared, ships anywhere. So also if you make a killer app this weekend, or a game that people are just really loving and it's adaptive and you want these headbands, anyone can order them. It ships off Amazon, can go anywhere in the world. There's hundreds of thousands out there already as well. So that was one of the reasons for using the particular headwear we selected for today. Again, we're giving these out as loaners, so just come to us, write to us, and have my personal cell phone here. So send me a message, give me a call, or email to get started with that. So that's the nuts and bolts of the developer side. And again, our team really wants to just support you, help build these applications. So especially those that have heard of neural interfaces, BCI, and they're interested but might be intimidated or not too sure exactly where this data is going to go. Just we encourage you to kind of dive on in and then get us involved in your development process. We're here to help and want to see some really fascinating projects coming out of it. So to kind of pique your imagination a little bit, these are some snapshots from our work, and by no means comprehensive, no means want to kind of pigeonhole, but just wanting to give you a sense for even with this relatively simple set of outputs. Again, the brain is the most amazing organ. I don't know, I'm a neuroscientist, I'm very biased, but it's doing a ton. There's a lot of rich data here. We know that we're very limited in what we're giving, but even with this, when it's done well, unlocks a lot. So what this example is in AR, wearing glasses, this is a HoloLens, sensors in between, and loading a UI. So we're doing some head tracking, and then what Neuos is telling it is to select. So it selected that. It now loads a couple pictures. That's kind of our CAPTCHA of the future, but basically that unlocks for you. And now you have your apps in this AR environment. And so that the rapid fire images, I'll talk more about that next, but that's a basic unlock. So you have this heads up display, you're able to direct the cursor and then actually select. So you could choose to use your fingers if you want, or you could do it just by brain. And that's where we see of where the field's going is less gesturing and talking and motions and just kind of intuitively interacting. So that's a UI UX example. Our next one is user identity. So this is not out the box of the SDK today. The future, this is something that we have working in lots of different ways, is real authentication. So just like a fingerprint is unique or Face ID, your brain signature is also very, very unique. So again, as Neuos calibrates, it also learns this fingerprint. One of the ways that we can test it in a way that's more accurate, really rigorous, much better than fingerprints, is by presenting images. So you present images to people, their brain responds, and you can choose to lock or unlock. So what I'll show now is a very optimized version. It's very fast. It's been, this false acceptance, false rejection rate is all tuned. You can implement a very similar thing and have a person have a secret, say, pass image, that they're only thinking about that image and you see a special spike or other implementation. So we don't want to limit you here, but just to say this sort of data is available. And so this is video in our office. You can see in the bottom right, wearing a HoloLens, some sensors. This is now me, where I'm looking at the center, kind of pops up this display. We're showing images at about 10 hertz here. So 10 per second, and Neuos can then reject or accept. So this is something that we see being very seamless. You also don't necessarily need images. You can just authenticate by brain. So you can imagine in the future dropping on a headset and it just knows that you're you, right? It can unlock. And maybe if you're wanting to choose something or access your email, then it'll give you a deeper prompt. But that's kind of one of the implementations. We then have user interacting with a UI without gesturing or talking. So this is really edge case where the person is in a music app and they're selecting to activate other players, and then they're also interacting with the music with this selection. So again, a person could be completely paralyzed, they can't move or can't speak. This function unlocks the world for them. Or you can be able, and maybe your hands are busy, or you don't want to talk, or you just want to use the brain command. And so this is a really powerful use case of commands. And what I want to do here is just peek under the hood a little bit, give you a view of the data level. What I'll say is the data level. So under the, behind the lens, what it looks like. So this is very noisy in a way, but if you look at the blue, so the blue data is someone's focus, their intention data, like how focused they are on a given element. And then the orange is a classifier that was built on top of it. So what you'll be getting out of our SDK would probably be closer to the blue, might be the orange, but you can build this so you can see that the orange, basically, if it crosses over the dotted line, our threshold is, all right, if a person really is focused and really wants to select it, then select. If they're really unfocused, then don't select. So this is a picture where the green and red show what the ultimate action was. And this is one of our good runs in lab, but it's like over 70 things in a row that a person's able to select accurately or not. So this gives you a sense with even just with this focus, it doesn't need to be quote unquote mind reading, or it's not your inner monologue. It's something like, the person is attended to that UI and they sent this command. So I believe that every group, for example, if you wanted to do these sort of controls, can implement something like this, even over the course of the hackathon, where you're getting all the data second by second. And here you could see there's a few seconds where it said, all right, let's wait for a 3-second window to see and making the decision. So all those tunings and how you connect it to your app is really a lot of room for creativity, and you can have some compelling results. 2 more quick video examples, and then be open to questions as well. So one of our projects has been with the US Air Force, and so that's where this video is from. But the essence works for any classroom setting, which is that you can be wearing device while you're in a lecture or while you're learning. And then this is, I think, the best shot. Or essentially, if you're in this virtual world, you're simulating an environment, we can then give you the actual brain response underneath. So with the Air Force, we're using this to make training much faster. Rather than telling someone, do this 20 times, you say, do this until we see that you know it. Do this until we see that you're not overloaded with your focus to attend to that task. So also learning math, for example, learning language, all these adaptive lessons where now it can be a real teacher who says, I see that, the audience lost me on that point. Let's go back to that. Or a digital teacher, right? Digital app, flashcards, anything that's adaptive that can say, this individual person should see it again, or they can move on, or this is what they enjoyed. Let's give them more examples like that. So we see a lot of really powerful learning use cases here as well. And then finally, gaming. So huge opportunities in gaming to both test games, but also to enhance them in real time. So here are a couple snapshots. This is my co-founder, Eitan, wearing a hat with sensors and playing Fortnite. So one of our measurements here was excitement that we're showing, but again, you can use enjoyment and focus today. Next will be a picture of Tetris. So one of our great examples of the zone is Tetris, right? So if Tetris is too fast, you die, you lose, it's not fun, right? If it's too slow, it's really boring. It's not fun, right? So it's somewhere in the middle where you say, all right, we want to get the person in the zone where it's difficult, it's hard, they have to be paying attention doing moves, but it's not too difficult, and it's not too easy either. So this kind of customization is the difference between someone, loading a Tetris and playing for 10 seconds and getting bored, or just getting completely immersed and lost in the experience. So that's a measure of the zone, that if you're building adaptive experiences, you can use that measure as kind of a ground truth for how much someone is immersed in your experience. And so that's a gaming example. If we were to put this plot, so again, you integrate Neuos API and you get all this data in real time, so you can change things in real time, but you can also capture the data and just record it and say, all right, we're gonna have someone play, for example, League of Legends, and we're gonna see what are their peaks and troughs, and we're gonna adapt the game. Or maybe you're just a gamer yourself and you wanna see where you made the mistake, or was it a question about your focus at a certain point. You can capture whole sessions, either stream them live if you want, or you can just look at that data yourself and get a report like this, where we're able to then compare and look at certain moments of the experience. And so with this, hope it gave kind of a picture of the whole continuum of applications here. We're Arctop, again, here for you most of all, so open for questions now or offline or downstairs, and really excited to connect with the different teams as your ideas crystallize and talk to you about some of the best practices and good implementations that we've seen, and provide you equipment. So yeah, that's all for me. Open for questions, and thanks for being there. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Question on, you had mentioned application on sport performance. Maybe can you provide a little bit more information on some of the applications there to teams or leagues or athletes you're actually working with?
Yeah.
And I'm curious on just seeing the amount of biometric data that's being captured, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Biometric data. But you look at Whoop, you look at Fitbit, you look at all these other things that teams are starting to track, and it seems like brain signals has not been one yet. So I guess where have you seen research on sort of leading or lagging indicators on whether the athlete's in the flow state, et cetera, et cetera. So, a lot of questions there, but just curious on
Yeah, great. Trying to unpack that. So kind of more in the category of traditional sports, I'd say, or the moving around, less esports or in share. And so yeah, there, like you said, a lot of wearables that have been adopted. One of the really interesting with Whoop is say that they've started to stream heart rate for golfers, right? So that is one indicator. And I'll talk more about what we're doing without listing too many names, but there's been a huge amount of engagement just with that measurement of heart rate. People love the heart rate much more than anyone thought. So the broadcasters are talking about it more. NBC Universal is seeing that as a very significant one. So companies like NBC or the Twitches of the world are seeing these data streams as being a way to engage much more with the audience. And like you said, we're along that trajectory of in this wearable timeline, not yet mainstream, but definitely far beyond just a heart rate. So that's there, and I'll come to you a second. Yeah, just real fast. And then with teams. So a lot of the work, again, there's the streaming side where it's about engagement, and there's a lot of big companies that are now seeing, say, what Whoop's doing there and expanding out. Then the teams themselves also working a lot on the analysis. I'd say a lot of what our work there is, and with some professional teams and also with college teams and going forward, we'll expand more. First of all, any sport where a person's wearing a helmet, anything on their head, you can be measuring during the game, right? So that's amazing for a lot of analytics, a lot of new information. I don't know if who watched Nadal's final on Sunday, but right, classic headband wear there. So a lot of the companies like Nike or the Lululemon's, different apparel companies that are then working with athletes professionally and then also recreational with digital tools. So some digital tool like I don't know, you're riding your Peloton and you have a screen that's giving you statistics. It's also adapting workouts. So you can imagine this also, there's, mirror products. There's a lot of other digital tools there where a unique thing that we bring is the brain side of it, both before the game, getting into that state of zone, kind of high performance, but then also afterwards, right? It talked about in between is the true performance and engagement. And then there's a scoreboard at the end as well, right? So is it helping or not? But one big kind of historically neglected part that we see really a lot of interest is around the recovery and around sleep, right? So a lot of these teams are traveling, they're across different time zones. There's no real good metrics on how well they slept. So that was one of the things also Whoop has done that. There's a lot of wearable work on that, but not at the level of granularity that you get from the brain. And both before and after, if I lay down, it's a certain signal coming from my wrist. From the brain is the gold standard really for sleep measurement. So looking, what you can anticipate from us is more products also related to sleep and this round the clock ability to track and then get tools, that are mainly by partners, right? So other applications that are building this in for a custom project. Again, back to the golf example, seeing heart rate is nice and engaging, seeing other brain metrics even better. And then for the golfers, the ability to get themselves into the right place to perform is kind of invaluable. So we're working in that space.
Yeah, because I'm just curious on even the training aspect. If you're a coach, right? How do you engage your athletes or your team? Do you provide more? Say they're physically tired, right? But you provide more intensity because they're actually not mentally tired. And how do you fine tune?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say that expertise is really developing now because obviously this new data for coaches, just like the heart rate tracker and different trackers were 5 to 10 years ago. So another use case that we'd like to talk about here is racing, right? So like Formula One racing, where there's certain physical exertion, but the mental exertion and how you're seeing a certain turn and how you practice, then that's a real art in the coaching. But that getting the data up rather than asking someone at the end of each lap, like, how did you feel there? How did you feel there? And surveys, right? It's like surveys aren't terrible. They get you some information, but it's a couple data points. This gets you a really extraordinary time-linked series, so you can actually look at events and a lot of things that are subjective that a person won't even necessarily be able to tell you or remember is just captured objectively and biometrically here.
Cool. So I'm just curious with regards to the data that you showed me, the graph that you showed me actually reminds me of the audience retention in YouTube. So if you're a YouTube creator, that's one of the things that actually look for. My question is like, can that data be manipulated? Or is there a way to create fake data and then like pretend it's excitement and all that?
Nice. So let me see if I get the question. So is there a way for you to say put on the device and manipulate the data so that you're pretending to be more focused or pretending to be enjoy, like the actor, right? Like can I act? Like I can.
There's ways for you to, for example, check if the audience retention is really like the audience retention.
Oh.
Sometimes you can create multiple.
Nice. All right. Yeah. So I'd say just rampant fraud and all kinds of tricks, things that are going on that won't speak to that. But at the core level, say this data, we see a big difference if someone's genuinely experiencing something, and this is the real data versus acting, where some of these things you really can't emulate. Or one of the earlier talks today, she talked about getting yourself sad and standing and trying to get sad, and you can make yourself sad after a certain amount of time and thinking about sad things. You'll get somewhere, but it's going to be diluted, or it's going to be much different than if you're actually genuinely sad, I'd say.
You get the experience, you don't measure the in between.
No, you'll get the in between. So again, and then it's more of a philosophical question, I guess. If you acted like you're sad and then you made yourself sad, you're a little sad, right? It's there, but you get the extreme, but you get a whole gradient there. So 0, we try to normalize everything in the brain to this 0 to 100 scale. Obviously, things aren't at this scale in the brain, but that's why it calibrates. So for you, this 0 to 50, you might be able to get to a 40 or 30 of sad, or not enjoying, so disliking and kind of negative, but you probably won't be able to get down to the 10. And then bottom line is this data is very hard to fake as well. And so like if you were to say feed fake brain data in or synthetic brain data, and that's a lot more the space of like the cyber security and authentication use cases, and looking at this data, there's a lot of distinguishable features of genuine human data that's coming in the moment. So yeah, whether this is solving YouTube's, I guess, compensation to YouTubers or all the fraud there, not sure. At wider scale though, maybe. But yeah, that's the essence. Yeah.
My question too, Dan, if I could speak back.
Yeah.
My question was when you mentioned cloud and you said that you were going to generate a model, and maybe that's just the model generation, but does the model actually run locally on the device, or how can we trust this with, let's say politicians or other people who just want to click a button, but it had been tampered with? Is there any possibility they could be tampered with?
It's a great question. So everything's running locally. So there's a ton of different implementations here. So the calibration we record, and then that goes up to the cloud, and that's trained and anonymized and treated like biometric data. And you'll see in our app, it's compliant. And then the models are all real time locally. So for 2 reasons: it's some of the most precious data imaginable that you can't be moving around. Like, we need to protect it, and one of the best ways is just keeping it on device. And then also the speed of it, that if you're going a round trip to the cloud all the time, you have different connectivity. And so just to give good performance and to give that security, it's on edge on device. Also with us, you can clear the calibration. The only data that's used to calibrate, can clear it at any time upon request. So that's one thing that as we're trying to define basically the standard here of what's, the best rules of the road as we see it. Very privacy conscious people who see a lot of information in this data. And then there's other companies that are just relying on the cloud or not anonymizing. It's also one of the things good to know that there's this brain identity is just intrinsic to the data. So have to be very, very careful about how we transmit it. But yeah, so it's clear that's all on edge, on device, and it's your data. It's like the analysis outputs are all yours. So that's an exciting thing. What we see is like the end consumer can actually own this data and see what apps get it, so you can choose to share with a certain app or not. Right, so that's, yeah, so active, yeah.
So I have a question on, you gave in one of the examples that for like a user interface, like you can say like yes or no, or you're interacting with this. Is the current capabilities of the SDK, does it allow you to get positional information about your context, or is it just sort of like a general I'm interacting with this or not? How fine-grained is that?
Yes, good question. So you should think about the SDK is primarily measuring. So it's the output. So for example, if you're in a HoloLens environment, you should be connecting that measurement, brain measurement with the head tracking and the UI, or that you're on a certain element. Your colliders, right? Listen to your colliders. There, if you're on an app, again, it gets a little trickier. So there's clever ways to do it. For example, is just using time as an example. So if you're in an app, it's not going to tell you what you're attending to. So it might be better to ask questions like, would you like to go left? Would you like to go right? Are you sure you want to go left? And then go left, right? So there's some things like that, but positionally now we're not so linked. And also orientation, it's feasible to do it with eye tracking. Some of the devices even might have eye tracking. So combining the brain measures with other measures is a great way to boost that performance. But we see it with SDK even now as is, with the right design, you can have these interactions and it'll be seamless, it'll be effective.
For example, you could have like a set of thresholds for certain values, like you could have like a pinwheel, and it's like to this level of like attention or thought or focus, then it'll switch between that.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. So pinwheel is a great example, like fresh idea that we haven't implemented here, but exactly. So it's a pinwheel. We're going to give you this feedback in real time, and then you can make a decision. One awesome thing about this data as well is that once something happens, you're getting more data still. So the brain's reaction to that is there. So say you make the wrong choice or your app does something bad, you could actually see that the person didn't like that, right? And adapt with that. So that's there. But with the focus and with this focal attention, it's really, something that people can control. You'll get a feel for it. And then you can implement things like the pinwheel that will, I think, work great. Yeah.
It's kind of similar. It's about like how accurate the UI can be if you want to see people focusing on certain UI, and how like comparable it will be with like such as like flashing an image using like SSVP, and how like the accuracy could be.
Yeah, good. So for those that don't know the term, or this good term, but jargon term, SSVP, steady state visual evoked potential. So if I flash, say one implementation, I can flash something at 10 hertz here or 5 hertz, and then 2 hertz here, right? And then if I pay attention to the 2 hertz, that's going to go to my visual cortex. There'll be a entrainment, or there'll be kind of a spike of power in this 2 hertz versus the 10 hertz. So that's one way that is robust. You get a lot of performance out of that. I wouldn't necessarily think about it as accuracy. There's a speed and accuracy component. So this takes a fair amount of time, but more so the user experience of SSVP is really bad. That it's historically been one of the ways to interact, but people get fatigued a lot over time, and so they really don't like to be kind of probed or have to pay attention like that. And it also ends up being slower. So it ends up being accurate and useful, but slower, leads to a lot of load, and again, can be used, but we see that it's not something that people like to use regularly or a lot. But the SSVP is very accurate. And again, one nice thing about that is that you don't necessarily need to get positional data. You just get the frequency data. And as long as you know where you assigned the frequencies, you know what element is blinking at that rate, you can figure it out. So that's an advantage. But what we see, so the resolution is open question, actually. So if you're interacting in say in a HoloLens environment, one of the things that you're getting naturally is the head movement. So we'd say if you have a cluster of buttons that are all very close and you want people to pick one or another, then it's going to be a real challenge. But if you, in the field of view, something like this, I could have a whole big array, and with a small movement in my head, you know exactly where the person's looking. And then you can think this yes or select and call it up. So things like that, where you can do this, very intuitively as a human. You're most of the time not trying to select something that you're not looking at, or SSVP, I could select that without looking, but the real use cases end up being not too frequent, or not as much for that. So just to be able to glance over a little bit and say that one, yes, is really powerful, and that ends up being faster and ultimately more accurate for people.
So the selection part is like the PC collaborated with other like headsets and there's input and your output.
Yeah, so I'd say there's two ways to get the selection, on the developer side. One is spatial, right? Spatial design and collaborative. And the other would be not collaborative, but using time. So say, now you're having a voice assistant ask you questions and say, do you want A, B, or C? And you can think about C, and then it chooses C. So if you're using time, you can use ours. Like that's where our output is rooted in, is really in time. Combining with space is some of the most powerful and kind of collaborative fun uses that we see. But really using time and just thinking along a timeline and selections will work perfectly well. So yeah, one of those directions you can collaborate or don't have to. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. So I have a question in terms of resolution. So I'm curious about like after the timely collaboration, calibration, approximately how many frame status can the model recognize?
Very good question. Yeah. So it's around 5 points per second. So around 5 hertz of output. So resolution would be data point every 200 milliseconds coming from the brain. So if you're focused, that would be 5 points for focus. enjoyment, and coming together. So pretty good resolution on those states. And that is also something that can be plus or minus, if it's if you're using maybe an older device or newer device, it's not locked in completely, but that's about the resolution that you get. And it matches well to the resolution of the actual processes in the brain. So there's like 50 milliseconds up to hundreds of milliseconds is when the brain's actually, how long it takes the brain to do things. Even though neurons are firing every millisecond, you can imagine resolution bigger and bigger, but for these outputs, every 5 seconds gives you really a lot. And so again, in a game, even that's some of our, the most time intensive interactions is a game that resolution we find works really well.
So another question probably is about neuroscience. So say that I'm staring at a red thing on the left and staring at a red thing on the right. So can I distinguish what portion of the brain when representing my eyeball orientation and what portion represent the red thing?
It's a really good question. I'd say the cheap or easy answer, as the eyes move, you can get that information well. Again, not with our SDK today. Some of the devices that are here are doing eye tracking. So that's some of the things that we see in the field. There's some good eye tracking cameras that are facing. So on that side, we wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you today from the SDK, but in the future, you can see us adding eye tracking naturally, or in a more crude sense. But what we see is that thinking about more of this collaboration, that if you want to track eyes in this way, you can really, collaborate with another device. If the question is, how is someone reacting to something on the left or the right, or what their vision is like, you could start to tease apart these neuroscience questions with a good design there. But we won't necessarily be able to tell you where your eyes are today. Does that answer it? Yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah.
This probably has a really complicated answer. Sorry, this probably has a really complicated answer that can't really be answered in the event.
Yeah.
But could you please clarify how you take a bunch of different signals and waves and make one coherent graph?
Yeah. Great. So 100% right. This is, I think, this is at least one course. Long answer. So that's the essence of what we're working on as a company. So I'd also say for all those here that are really interested in the neuroscience and the algorithms we're hiring, we want to talk to you about that down in the bits and bytes. Also on the developer side, once the data gets simplified, there's a lot of data science there. But to say in a way, it's a signal processing problem, right? Digital signal processing. And so a lot of solutions that you see, maybe the short answer, our heuristic would be something like speech recognition, right? So if you think about how speech recognition works, you have the audio file that's coming through, and there's certain properties of the audio, but then there's a very intelligent thing on the back that knows how the language works, right? So if I'm speaking Spanish, it'll use one model. If I'm speaking English, it'll use another model, and then it's able to match different things and extract the right features. So I'd say, so the answer is kind of twofold. One is extracting the right features. So these are certain spectral analyses, frequency analyses, different evoked potentials is a word, or steady state visual evoke. The brain's doing all kinds of things, and that's kind of the core of neuroscience, is what's the electrical thing that's happening, and then that's ultimately the grammar. So our system has the grammar of the brain and the sorts of, say, changes in these broad patterns that indicate that a person has changed their attentional state or their enjoyment. And bottom line, it's taken a while to run enough studies, see brains in enough context to get enough of that pattern recognition so that some of the deep learning models start really clicking. And just like speech recognition, for a while, you have kind of crude capabilities, and then it has this big jump up. So that's the short answer is feature extraction, and then some intelligence that's analyzing it that's very domain specific to the brain, right? So happy to really go as deep. Yeah, talk more on this later. We love that stuff.
Just sort of jumping off on that.
Yeah.
What biophysical model are you using precisely to model the brain? Is it like the Hodgkin-Huxley model, or is it a series of different models to model those spikes?
So it's modeling the patterns that are manifest on the surface of the skin. So one of our goals is not, for example, to go backwards, which is a great goal of neuroscience, but we're not trying to say what source gave what. So the model is not the Huxley, not these, but it's a series of other models that we put together for the grammar of like, what does this look like? Just like speech, you know, you can model the trachea and muscle when someone talks, or you can say, all right, well, when the air gets out their mouth, what's happening there? So we're more in the, all right, air is out their mouth rather than trachea and muscle model. Yeah. Thank you.
One of the things I'm really interested in is like career and life design. So I was wondering if maybe there's some examples you have where people are making decisions. So maybe they're presenting with multiple decisions, and I was wondering how subtle the nuances you can detect in enjoyment or anticipation are, or if there's any examples of these.
Yeah, great question. So I wish I had more examples of fully, you know, developed projects in this space, because I think it's one of the ones that can have a lot of really big impact on people. But some of the examples are like if you ask certain questions in certain social contexts, certain focus groups will lead to either less information or some biases. So getting this data per second with the right processes, you can tease out, you know, things that someone might be, say, suggesting versus how they're actually feeling about something. And so some of the best examples I have of that would be in VR. Actually, we're able to immerse someone into a simulated interview. So this is also, I've seen it for job interview training, that people, you know, they're very qualified, but they won't get the job because there's something goes wrong in the interview. So in these simulated interviews, can see how people are reacting and maybe what question really bothered them or threw them off for that interview, and then they can learn from that. But here, I think if you think about the interviewer suggesting different options and showing, you know, here's a clip of your day-to-day life as a surgeon, here's a clip day-to-day life as a designer, or something like this, you could then really make objective a lot of their feelings about it that can get rid of some of the social norms or what someone might tell you. Does that address it? So yeah, it can be done. Really excited to see it can be done, but it's definitely an earlier stage. So some of our clients, they're looking for the killer app there, like the golden way to do it, but definitely can. Yeah.
So when you talk about like these like brain data about feelings, what would be the different like spectrum of feelings that you can detect, like joy and like 20% joy, or like anticipation, like very specific feelings?
Yeah, great question. So down to the core of like emotion science and psychology as a field, or as humanity, we don't know how many emotions there are, right? You can get one group says, oh, there's more than 100 at least. Another group says, no, we modeled XYZ, there's only 27. There's a few. So I'd say as Arctop over time as a company, we expect to get a lot more understanding of this landscape, right? What are all the possibilities? That said, today we have a very simplified view. So we get the data that has, you know, the totality of the human experience, but then we separate and we clean, and there's some information that is just not processable or not provided today. So a person might be, say, afraid of something, but they're very focused because they're afraid. In the API today, you'll see their focus really change, but you won't be able to say whether it's fear or a positive. You know, you could then look at the enjoyment and say, all right, well, they're really enjoying it, so it's either a horror movie and they love horror movies, or it's not fear, right? So you got to use the context. But yeah, just to say today, we're drastically oversimplifying the human experience and what we give, and we'll be adding more and more over time. The outputs that we get today are mainly dictated by what our customers have wanted, what the world, I think, wants first, and what will lead to apps that give this powerful benefit to people, and then we'll add more and more. And so one, for example, that's not in today is anxiety to relaxation, where there's a lot of value, and that obviously will be provided eventually. Or again, the fear is a significant one, and there's a lot of other ones that we have working, and it's in-house. It's about a release timing, but today it's focus, it's enjoyment as the two core metrics that we give.
And actually a follow-up question. So based on that, are there like applications definitions in terms of emotional modeling, where you understand like what kind of emotions I'm feeling.
Yeah, sure.
What kind of emotions I'm feeling over a long period of time, and that might be suggestions of like my personality or like mental disorders.
Great. Yeah. So I'll answer this quickly, and then I'm being told we'll take it outside. But so yeah. So in short, think about this as a Fitbit of the brain, right? And just to be able to monitor this, and for the self-awareness, maybe you want it for yourself, or to share with a clinician, or to share with a friend. You know, the use cases are very open, and because we can measure it objectively, makes it possible. So short answer, yeah, we'll take it offline. Happy to expand on it, Tom. Thanks. I'll step over here. Thanks.
Okay, non-mic. So you have a choice of these two or this.
We can also field questions outside. We'll be downstairs in the room.
Yeah, or over Discord or email, whatever's easiest.
Do you want me to launch a Zoom meeting right now?
Yes. Well, actually, first, why don't we do system configuration, system audio?
Maybe I will.
Settings. Oh, if you go to, actually, if you go to settings and audio, sound. No, not in Zoom. Yes, so sound.